print disability, which makes reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org.
Hello, this is Jackie, and for the next hour, I'll be reading from the Sunday, May 3rd issue of the Viewpoints section of the Buffalo News on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Our love for O Canada is about them and us too, by Bruce Andriarch. About 20 years ago, we had a going-away party for a reporter in the backyard of our then city editor's house. The reporter, who was from Canada, was going home to take a job in Toronto. After we said our farewells with the usual assortment of jocular and sentimental comments, we did what seemed perfectly natural in that moment. We serenaded her with the Canadian national anthem. If she worked in almost any other American city, that unexpectedly emotional moment would not have happened. But of course, it happened in Buffalo, where you are just as likely to meet someone who can sing O Canada by heart as you are to meet someone who can nail the Pledge of Allegiance in one try. It's not as easy as you think if the rest of the class isn't reciting it with you. The rest of the world learned of our unusual and international communal quirk this week when technical difficulties before Tuesday night's Stanley Cup playoffs game between the Buffalo Sabres and the Boston Bruins caused singer Cammie Clooney's microphone to cut in and out while she was singing. It was no big deal for the 19,000 people in attendance. They were singing their lungs out, as usual, already, so they just got a little louder and sang the whole with the next to no accompaniment from Clooney, complete with the big crescendo on the finishing lyrics, "We stand on guard for thee." It was the second time this month that our anthem affection engendered abundant attention. The first time came before Game 1, when some non-Buffalonians tuned in, heard us singing the Canadian anthem in addition to the Star-Spangled Banner, and took to social media to ask a reasonable question. Why do they sing the Canadian national anthem before a game between two teams from America? The answer is both simple and complicated. We do it because that's who we are. We do it because it's Buffalo. Ask a Western New Yorker if they've ever had a conversation like this. You know, I've never been to a foreign country. You've never been to Canada? Well, of course I've been to Canada. Like many of you, I probably have known the words to O Canada longer than I've known the words to any other song, with the possible exception of Happy Birthday and the Alphabet Song. I can't remember when I went to my first Sabres game in Memorial Auditorium, but it was so long ago that the French Connection was just the title of a recent movie. But by the time I settled into my seat in the last row in the oranges for the first time, I had already heard the anthem of both the United States and Canada 100 times on the radio, and I was thrilled to finally belt them out with 16,432 of my fellow fans. The same two men performed both anthems before every home game in those days. A good way to tell how old someone is and or how long they've been a Sabres fan is to see how long it takes them to finish this phrase. Organist Norm Wullen, along with... The answer, of course, is tenor Joe Byron. In the 70s, you knew the game was about to start when the public address announcer, Milt Ellis, introduced the duo before Wullen pounded out the first notes of O Canada on the odds pipe organ. In fact, before the Sabres played an exhibition game against the Soviet Union in 1976 in the odd, Ellis announced that Woolen would play the Soviet national anthem and then would be accompanied by Byron for the U.S. national anthem. Then Ellis said this: "Because of TV commitments, the Sabres regret that we will not be playing the Canadian national anthem." The crowd booed loudly. It probably never occurred to anyone that day to think, why would we sing their anthem? That's because around here, both of them were and our anthems. Singing along is a way to erase the border and embrace our team, our sport, and each other. It turns out that we take the City of Good Neighbors business seriously. Canada might technically be another country, but it's close enough to be a Buffalo suburb. And in the days before we worried about international terrorism, human smuggling, and other nastiness, it pretty much was. Given the change in relations between our two nations, singing the Canadian national anthem in the United States might seem to the rest of the world like a political statement of some kind. There is nothing political about it for most of us, but it is assuredly a statement. And that statement is simple: welcome to Buffalo. Late again in the editorial. New York's packed with policy budgets are disruptive attacks on transparency. New York State's annual budget process is off the rails. It's not just that the budget is now more than a month late. That's bad enough and causes serious problems for entities like school districts that need to know their state aid numbers so they can plan their own annual budgets. Most are due this month. An arguably worse problem than tardiness is the opacity with which these budget discussions are conducted. Even though the talks aren't between three men in a room anymore, there are still three people, 2 women and a man, plus staff, and the room is still closed to journalists and the public. The talks between Governor Kathy Hochul, Senate Majority Leader Andrea Stewart, Cousins, and Assembly Speaker Carl Hastie aren't just about numbers either. Far from it. The budget is now a big fat sheaf of policies, many of which will have impacts that reverberate for decades. This year, that closed room is where major changes to New York climate law, wide-ranging auto insurance reforms, restrictions on cooperation with immigration enforcement, and significant reforms to the State Environmental Quality Review Act, among other issues, are being debated. The governor has the edge in these discussions. She sets the agenda. Reporters are given hints about progress and offers on the table, which are duly relayed to the public. But it's not nearly as open as the traditional legislative process on these issues would be. There might be floor debates, with open conversations between the bill's sponsors, leadership, and the governor's office. Policy proposals should go through the normal legislative process. As it is, extended budget talks take a big bite out of the legislative session, with much less time to discuss and pass bills. The blame for all of this often goes to a 2004 appeals court decision, Silver v. Pataki, that solidified the governor's power over the process. The court determined that the state constitution protects the governor's policies that dictate when, how, or where money is spent. The legislature can only reduce or completely reject the appropriations. But the governor's power over these negotiations extends much further back, to a 1927 constitutional amendment setting up executive budgeting under Governor Al Smith. Complaints are heard every year. Is it a good public process? We believe the answer is no, and it's up to the legislature to do something about it because that's their job. Blair Horner of Good Government Group NYPIRG said during a Spectrum News Capital Tonight interview. One glaring lack of transparency this year was Hochul's waiting until well into the process, past the deadline, to amend budget proposals, to lay out her specific proposed changes to New York's Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act. As Horner noted, there may be significant changes to a very important law, and the public may only find out about it after the fact. It must be admitted that major policies that have the overwhelming approval of most New York voters are often included in these negotiations. For example, Hochul points to the school cell phone ban, Empire AI, and maternal health benefits as some of the things she got done through the annual budget process. However, former Governor Andrew Cuomo was able to get legislation of same-sex marriage and a local property tax levy cap done through the normal legislative process, even with a Republican-controlled Senate. The bottom line? The state budget does not need to be so packed with policy that it disrupts the legislative calendar, holds up municipal and school district budgeting, and limits public transparency. At least in New York, unlike Congress in Washington, the legislature has not been made irrelevant by the executive power of the governor. Hochul's fellow Democrats are often among the loudest in opposition to her proposals, especially concerning auto insurance reform and climate law amendments. But these debates should be held out in the open. And here's a crazy thought. Let the budget talks be about dollars and cents. You're listening to a reading of articles and features from the Viewpoints section of the Buffalo News on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Another voice. Energy. Battery storage can ease grid problems. By Emily Flanagan. New York's electric grid is approaching an equation that its current physical footprint cannot solve. When consumers flip a switch, they expect a light. But when the infrastructure sustaining that certainty is reaching its physical limit, with grid deficiencies scheduled to arrive as soon as this summer, meanwhile, the ratepayers are absorbing the costs of deferred investment. Lagging transmission construction and aging, unreliable fossil-fired generators have produced a network unable to support the state's rapidly growing energy demands. As the state retires old generators, massive industrial loads and millions of new electric devices are being added to the grid, converging to create an increasingly volatile operating environment with the thinnest reliability margins in decades. Battery Energy Storage Systems, BESS, are one of the few tools that can stabilize both supply and demand, absorbing excess energy to discharge during surges in demand or drop-offs in generation. BESS is especially valuable during peak demand events like heat waves or winter storms. By injecting stored power into the grid, BESS balances the grid equation and eases the strain on local grid infrastructure, helping prevent local outages while keeping cooling and heating services online. Grid stabilization goes hand in hand with rate protection. BESS reduces our reliance on expensive peaker plants, mitigating the need for costly on-demand power generation. BESS also acts as a price stabilizer, buying power when it's cheap and abundant and releasing it when it's expensive, effectively capping the volatility of monthly bills. Compared with transmission upgrades that can take upward of a decade to deploy, BESS's compact footprint allows it to be installed quickly and wherever it's needed most, specifically neighborhoods with overloaded substations or heightened reliability risks. BESS serves as a flexible, fast, responding complement to these needed infrastructural upgrades, soothing some of the challenges associated with the energy transition. New York cannot wait for a crisis to build the storage it needed yesterday. We must treat BESS as an essential infrastructure to ensure the 2026 reliability gap doesn't become a permanent feature of New York life, and that the flick of a switch still guarantees light. Emily Flanagan is CEO at Carson Power. Saber's celebration solidifies family ties. This is in the My View column, and it's by Joanne Iannello of Grand Island. There are moments in parenting you expect to remember forever. The day they're born, their first step, their first day of school, the time they stand on a stage and you clap so hard your hands hurt. Those are the milestone moments, the ones people put in photo albums and graduation slideshows. But some of the most powerful moments come quietly. No audience, no announcement. Just one ordinary moment from your grown child that catches you completely off guard and goes straight to the deepest part of your heart. That happened to me last Sunday night. Raising 3 boys, our house was always centered around sporting events, mostly hockey. My youngest son began playing when he was 4 and continued through adulthood, tending goal at a very competitive level. On top of that, we were huge fans of the Buffalo Sabres. Then came the 14 seasons without being in the playoffs, but still, my son was a fan through and through. Now 30, my youngest son attended his first Buffalo Sabres playoff game as an adult, 15 years in the making. I received a text from him when he got to the arena telling me how awesome the excitement was. A little while later, I received another text telling me how emotional it was when they had the singing of the national anthem. At the end of the second period, when the Sabres were losing by a score of 2-0, I received yet another text asking me to send good vibes. They needed my help. After the Sabres pulled off an utterly astonishing win, my phone rang. My son was on the other end, ecstatic. I could tell he may have had a libation or two, so I first asked if he was driving, to which I was told no, they had a designated driver. He told me during the game he thought of all the times we took him to hockey games when he was little, and all the times we drove him from city to city when he played. I thought I was the only one who kept those memories near and dear to my heart. I was so proud of him at that moment. Then, as we were ready to hang up, he shouted, "Love you, Mom," at which point I shouted, "Love you too, get home safe," and a tear ran down my face. Because when your child is little, you spend years pouring yourself into them without any guarantee that any of it will last. You love them through fevers and fears, through slammed doors and heartbreak, through seasons when they adore you and seasons when they can barely stand to be in the same room with you. You teach and repeat and correct and forgive. You hope that one day, long after they leave your house, the love you gave them will still be there, tucked somewhere inside of them. Parenting is one of the only jobs where you can give everything you have and still lie awake at night wondering if you did enough. If they will remember the ways you tried to protect them, or only the times you got it wrong. If they will carry your love with them or outgrow the need for it altogether. Then, one day, they're grown. They have their own griefs and joys. They have become a whole person in a world that no longer runs through you. And then, out of the blue, the phone rings. And with one sentence, they tell you everything you did was worth it. Thank you, Sabers. Now to go wipe the happy tears from my face again. DC shooting serves as a reminder the U.S. has a mental health crisis. Shots fired at Correspondents' Dinner dominated the TV headlines following the gun attack at the Washington Hilton. Correction, shots were not fired at the dinner, but in the corridor outside. That's where security had pinned the accused gunman, Cole Thomas Allen, on his stomach and handcuffed him. Some journalists like to over-dramatize everything, especially concerning themselves. Sure, the alleged attacker released a manifesto saying he wanted to take down President Trump and members of his administration. But the most dangerous place that night was inside the assailant's head. That hasn't slowed the predictable banter about today's toxic political environment and how anger at Trump and company apparently set off a would-be assassin. This is a person who attended one of the most prestigious STEM universities in the country, in technology, Caltech. Got an engineering undergrad degree, got a master's in computer science. One commentator said in a surprised voice he was working as a part-time teacher, but he described himself as a game developer. Let us disregard the assumption that academically or professionally successful people have their heads screwed on straight. Someone who talks eloquently in full sentences is not always more mentally coherent than the drug-addled street person hollering insanities at passers-by. Some of the worst killers had what our society generally considers the best minds. The Unabomber, Ted Kaczynski, entered Harvard at 16, earned a doctorate in math, and taught at the University of California, Berkeley. He later moved to a remote cabin in Montana from which he ran an 18-year bombing campaign that killed 3 people and injured more than 20. Amy Bishop was a Harvard-trained neuroscientist who taught at the University of Alabama in Huntsville. When denied tenure, she shot 3 colleagues at a faculty meeting, killing 3. At age 21, she shot her brother dead, an action then ruled as accidental. Would someone never enrolled at Harvard have been let off the hook so easily? Michael Lauder entered Yale as an undergrad and cruised through its law school. He quickly landed a perch at the highly selective Bain & Company consulting group. But Lauder's long struggle with serious mental illness developed into schizophrenia. He eventually knifed his girlfriend to death, thinking that she was a robot or a doll out to kill him. Lauder's friend, Jonathan Rosen, tells the story in his book, The Best Minds. Rosen condemns the 1960s-era push to close mental hospitals and end most involuntary confinement on the belief that even severe psychiatric illness would be managed through outpatient care. At night, the Gilo Beach serial killer stalked young women, strangling, ate, and dismembering bodies. By day, Rex Heuermann sat in his Manhattan office advising architects and builders on their projects. Like Kaczynski, whose manifesto claimed that his violence would save humankind from unfettered technology, Allen's screed pompously wallows in self-importance, with florid apologies and thank yous. He boasts, "I walk in with multiple weapons and not a single person there considers the possibility that I could be a threat." And he threatens any participants standing in his way. After all, he adds, most of them choose to attend a speech by a pedophile, rapist, and traitor, and are thus complicit. Fortunately, The alleged shooter's efforts led to no deaths, his own included. If they served any purpose, it was not to replace the current leadership. It served as a reminder of America's mental health crisis and how hard it will be to confront honestly. This was written by Froma Harup from the Creators Syndicate. How Barroom Slang Turned into a Federal Speech Case, 8647, by Susan Estrich. When I was working my way through law school as a bartender, we used to 86 drinkers who caused trouble. The term has been around that long. It certainly didn't mean we meant to kill a problem drinker. It meant we cut him off. That is, stopped serving him drinks, or if he was really out of control, asked the bouncer to escort him out. James Comey, the former FBI director who earned President Trump's permanent hatred by daring to investigate Russian efforts to influence the 2016 election, has been indicted for arranging some shells in a picture that spelled out 8647 last May on his beach walk. He posted the picture on Instagram with the caption, "Cool shell formation on my beach walk." Since when is that a federal crime? My definition is the same one you get from ChatGPT. 86 is slang that means to get rid of, eject, cancel, or refuse service to someone or something. So, 86 someone equals kick them out, ban them, get rid of them. The bartender 86'd him. He was thrown out or cut off. We're 86ing that item. It's removed, like from a menu. As for the source of 86ing, the internet says that there is no single source, but a few common theories, none of which has anything to do with assassinating the president. Restaurant bar slang, most accepted, used by staff to mean an item is unavailable or a customer should be removed. Prohibition-era code, possibly shorthand for no more or don't serve. Military radio shorthand, numbers used as coded instructions. So everyone who can't wait for Trump's term to end or for him to be removed from office is a criminal? This is the second attempt by the Trump administration to punish Comey for his investigation. The first one got thrown out, having been brought by a totally inexperienced prosecutor who had been illegally appointed. Pam Bondi got fired because she wasn't aggressive enough in punishing Trump's enemies. Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche certainly got the message. While this case is unique, and this indictment stands out because of the name of the defendant, his alleged conduct is the same kind of conduct that we will never tolerate and that we will always investigate, Blanche said at a press conference on Tuesday. That is utterly ridiculous. Take a look at Amazon and search for 8647. You can take your pick of hats, t-shirts, tops for women, and hoodies. Does Blanche really intend to investigate all of the Amazon sellers and buyers who put 8647 on their products? Of course not. Comey has made clear that he will fight the charges. I'm still innocent. I'm still not afraid, Comey said, and I still believe in the independent federal judiciary. So let's go. Let's go indeed. This case violates the First Amendment. The Justice Department will be unable to prove that Comey intended to assassinate the president. In fact, after Republicans raised hell about the Instagram post, Comey immediately took it down, explaining that he assumed the shells represented a political message, but didn't realize some folks associate those numbers with violence. It never occurred to me, but I oppose violence of any kind, so I took the post down, he wrote. It will be thrown out by the courts. It will never even get to a jury. This is not going anywhere. This is clearly not a punishable threat. Eugene Volka, a senior fellow at the conservative Hoover Institution at Stanford University, told CNN. But in the meantime, it only reaffirms Trump's abuse of the judicial process. He's a small man, consumed by the desire for vengeance against a man he fired nearly 10 years ago. It does not serve him well. You're listening to a reading of articles and features from the Viewpoints section of the Buffalo News on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. In Everybody's column, letters from our readers. Sabres fan receive a Canadian thank you. There was a story in the national news on April 29th describing how the fans at a hockey game in Buffalo stepped up and sang the Canadian national anthem when a problem occurred with the sound system. Remarkably, it was not a Canadian team that was playing. Apparently, this playing of the Canadian anthem is a regular thing at games in Buffalo. I wish to express my sincere thank you to the people of Buffalo for this very heartwarming show of support for Canadians. Normally, all we hear in the news in Canada are the attacks, snide remarks, and denigrations directed at Canada that come from the Trump administration officials. So to hear of this ongoing show of support is extremely gratifying. I sincerely thank you. And I have to say, knowing this will make me much more welcoming toward the American tourists who will be coming to Canada this year. By Gordon Foy, Burnaby, British Columbia. Singing of anthem boasts long-held ties. From all Canadians to Sabres fans, we sincerely appreciate the incredible gesture you showed in singing "O Canada" at the April 28th playoff game. At a time when emotions can run high and differences can feel magnified, your act of respect and unity spoke volumes. Hearing the packed arena filled with voices from across the border come together to honor another country's anthem was very powerful. It was more than just a song. It was a reminder of the shared values, mutual respect, and long-standing friendship between our communities and our nations. Sports have always had a unique way of bringing people together, and in that moment, you demonstrated the very best of what that spirit looks like. Your kindness and sportsmanship did not go unnoticed, and it meant a great deal to many Canadians watching and listening. Thank you for showing respect to our anthem. Go Sabres Go. Devi Breda, Brampton, Ontario. Polenkar's address fails on affordability. Erie County residents reading Sunday's Buffalo News editorial praising County Executive Mark Polenkar's might reasonably ask, where's the long-term vision? Polenkar said his 2026 State of the County would focus on affordability. He proposed free light bulb exchanges and first-time home buyer subsidies funded by taxpayers. These ideas do little to reduce the cost of living for working families. After 14 years in office, residents should expect a more comprehensive strategy. Affordability requires serious structural solutions. There are also concerns about execution. ErieNet has cost over $40 million and has reportedly been close to completion for years, but it remains non-operational. Last year, the county invested $9 million into the former Westwood Country Club, a project already delayed until at least 2028. These examples indicate a pattern of ambitious announcements followed by delayed results. The county executive pointed to a budget surplus and proposed additional spending. However, that surplus exists because residents have been consistently overtaxed. Using those funds for new programs doesn't equate to affordability. Returning it to taxpayers or prioritizing infrastructure improvements would provide direct and lasting relief. If Erie County is serious about affordability, it should pursue policies that deliver immediate impact. A cap on the county's sales tax on gasoline, which was rejected in 2023, is one example. My caucus proposed it again this year. If the county executive cares about affordability, he should support it. County spending has soared during this administration. The focus should be on right-sizing, strengthening services, and reducing the tax burden. Erie County doesn't need more promises. It needs results. Lindsay Larigo, Erie County Legislator, West Seneca. Claims about climate law's cost are incorrect. Regarding Dottie Gallagher's opinion piece, Hochul's climate proposal meets the moment, 424. One must ask why Gallagher repeats claims. The costs of proceeding with the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act as written, and they are staggering, an extra $4,000 in annual costs for the average household, and a $2.23 increase in the per gallon price of gas that have been debunked again and again. Gallagher's figures are based on a flawed NYSERDA analysis of a cap and invest program that exists nowhere in the real world. It is based on a program with no limit at all on the price of carbon allowances. Every locality with a functioning cap and invest program, including California, Washington State, and British Columbia, has a price ceiling. And they include consumer protections, also missing from the NYSERDA analysis. It's as if Governor Kathy Hochul had deliberately set out to create an extreme program no one could support. But our current moment includes another reason we cannot afford to delay the mandates of our climate law, the CLCPA. That is the reckless and ill-conceived war with Iran. Rising gas prices? We already have them, and they're leading to greater financial insecurity for families across the state. It is imperative for the state to wean itself off its dependence on fossil fuels and commit to a clean energy future. The benefits will be a financial boon for New Yorkers in energy price stability, jobs in budding industries, fewer polluting emissions, and a sustainable future. Joanne Scanlon, Rochester. Hawley needs to pick a side on the data center. Despite profound public resistance reaching all the way to Governor Kathy Hochul, the massive Stream Data Center project in the town of Alabama continues to inch forward. While on the state level, both the Senate and Assembly have introduced a bill that would enact a 3-year moratorium on data center permitting. Senate Bill S-9144, Assembly Bill A-10141. State reps continue to take a not my circus, not my monkeys approach when asked by so many of their constituents for help. Some take even less of a stance in that they take no stance at all, refusing to publicly promote or condemn the project. The latest example of this is Assemblyman Steve Hawley, Republican, representing Assembly District 139, which includes all of Orleans and Genesee counties and portions of Monroe and Erie counties. Just last week, Hawley mailed out postcards warning of impending energy crises, rising utility bills, an unstable utility grid, and his great plan to save us all. And yet, no mention of the Stream Data Center project. What could be more dangerous to an already unstable grid than adding a massive data center that requires 500 megawatts to operate? What could cause already rising utility costs to increase even further? One way or another, we deserve to know where he stands. If he really means all that he claims on his latest postcard, it would only make sense that he would also be against this project. We're waiting. Elizabeth Thompson, Batavia. Midterm results may be contested. Don't get your hopes up too high regarding a Democrat sweep of the 2026 midterms. President Trump has successfully eliminated the folks who supplied the guardrails to stop his lies of a stolen 2020 election and replaced them with an abysmal horde of his own cronies. Former individuals from the government's Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, who held their ground in stopping Trump's last bid to steal 2020, have now either been fired or removed to other governmental posts. The FBI, too, is under his thumb. The people from the Departments of Justice and Homeland Security that held the last line last time are gone, leaving only bootlicking partisans. With his approval numbers tanking, his weak and non-existent oversight of the economy, his war of choice with Iran, brutal immigration solutions, and his stonewalling of the Epstein report, where his name appears well over 1,000 times, Trump and company know they are in for a remarkable rebuke. His plan is a reformatting of the agencies that oversee elections with sycophants who will contend that the 2026 midterms were saturated with fraud. He then will more than likely attempt to cancel the results completely or temporarily suspend them until he sees fit to call for another election. Bet on it. It took Hungary's illiberal democracy 16 years to finally get rid of Viktor Orban. Trump's betting we won't wait that long. Stephen Saraceno, Buffalo. Oh, Canada, we know the words by heart and from the heart, by Eric Brady. There is a photo of a Boston Bruins player on the ice, and the caption reads, Boston Bruins goaltender Jeremy Swayman stands for the anthems prior to playing the Buffalo Sabres during the first period of Game 5 at KeyBank Center on Tuesday. Kudos to the Buffalo Sabres fans, 19,020 of you, who belted out Canada's national anthem the other night when Cammy Clooney's mic fritzed out. To me, the most surprising part is that anyone would be surprised. Yes, we know the words by heart hereabouts. Of course we do, and we feel them too. Folks who live elsewhere watched the viral video, and some expressed amazement that this would happen in the United States, given the current political climate. But that nasty business about a 51st state is a provocation that has nothing to do with us. Here in Buffalo, we style ourselves as the city of good neighbors. In this context, let's make that good neighbors, Neighbors. Spelling matters. Look no further than the name Sabres itself. The spelling in standard American English is Sabers. But a half century and more ago, owners of the new NHL franchise in Buffalo deliberately chose the Canadian spelling. We feel many Canadian hockey patrons will come here, Northrop Knox said at the time, and this will give them an identification with the club. So did the club's decision to play both the American and Canadian anthems before every home game. Other NHL teams in the United States typically play O Canada only when a Canadian team is in the house. Even the Detroit Red Wings, who should know better. When the men's NCAA basketball tournament came to Buffalo in 2000, organizers here informed the NCAA folks that they would have to change their minute-by-minute pregame plans to make room for the Canadian anthem. They didn't understand it at first, said John Maddock, who was then the athletic administrator at host school Canisius. They had never run across that before. Even now, we do have to remind the NCAA to build in time for it, said Matt Rettenauer, an associate athletics director at Canisius. Some of the fans who sang O Canada before Tuesday's Game 5 were themselves Canadians, of course. Most, though, were Western New Yorkers. Our kinship with Canada is our birthright on the border. Besides, the Queen Elizabeth Way does not run just one way. Toronto Maple Leaf fans sing the American anthem when a mic failed at the Scotiabank Arena 3 years ago before a game against, guess who? The Sabres. No mic? No problem. The Sabres tweeted at the time, "The Leafs crowd sings the USA national anthem. Look at them a bit to get there, but they got there." Don Granato, the American who was then coach of the Sabres, said, "That was a pretty special moment to be in Canada and hear the crowd singing our national anthem. Hats off to the fans that were here." Speaking of hats off, plenty of the KeyBank crowd on Tuesday sang with their Sabres ball caps over their hearts. These are the same people who hate Toronto Maple Leafs, but love day trips to Toronto. Robin Elliott, a professor of musicology at the University of Toronto, praised O Canada in the National Post newspaper in November during the World Series. "I think it's a great national anthem," he said. "It's simple, it's memorable. There's really a lovely modulation partway through that, musically speaking, that is very satisfying." A national anthem should have a melodic range, which a group of people can sing together, because the whole purpose of the national anthem is to bring a large group of people together. Some 19,020 Sabres fans are living testimony to that. We are two countries, one region. We share Tim Hortons, two lakes, one river, and a lake-deep love of hockey. That's why their anthem sings to us too. You're listening to a reading of articles and features from the Viewpoints section of the Buffalo News on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. In the Buffalo Next section, Spotlight on the Workforce. Local labor force is still smaller than before COVID, by David Robinson. Where have all the workers gone? Despite a solid job market and generally strong demand for workers since the pandemic, the Buffalo-Niagara region's labor force still is smaller than it was before the COVID-19 lockdown. Overall, the region has about 1% fewer workers, around 6,900 in all, from its pre-pandemic peak in February of 2020, according to the State Labor Department data. The implications of the smaller workforce are significant, economists say. For one, it means the supply of available workers is constrained, which poses a challenge for a company that is interested in moving or expanding here and needs to hire dozens or possibly hundreds of workers. It also means that companies here have a harder time filling vacancies caused by routine turnover as employees retire, find different jobs, or move away. All that is a constraint on potential growth compared with other parts of the country where the population is growing and workers are more plentiful. It's a lingering impact from the pandemic. As the lockdown hit, many workers who were on the cusp of retirement decided to move up their plans and dropped out of the labor pool. The region's declining population, which is dropping again after a modest immigrant-fueled uptick during the 2010s, also doesn't help because the flow of new workers into the labor force is modest. And the modest job growth coming out of the pandemic, which hasn't yet recovered all of the jobs lost during the downturn, limits the influx of new workers because the availability of good-paying jobs that would entice a worker to uproot their family and move here also has been scant. In tourism, how industry leaders face the challenge of luring visitors, by Samantha Christman. Western New York's tourism industry is heading into a high-stakes season, buoyed by new investment and marketing efforts, but facing mounting challenges from strained relations with Canada to transportation gaps and shifting local tax policies. Industry leaders say the region's vital tourism economy is at a crossroads, with external pressures like declining Canadian visitation, tighter international travel requirements, and debates about bed tax. The importance of Western New York's hospitality and tourism sectors cannot be overstated, said Seth Piccirillo, Senior Director of Events and Programs at the Buffalo Niagara Partnership, which hosted a recent forum on the key forces that could shape whether the region builds on its momentum or struggles to maintain it. Tourism is big business in Western New York, accounting for an estimated $4.1 billion in economic activity, according to a report by consulting firm Tourism Economics. Erie County accounts for nearly two-thirds of all tourist spending in the region, more than double that in Niagara County, home to the iconic Niagara Falls State Park. We're also at a time where there's many things impacting our work that are beyond our control, Piccirillo said. We recognize that there are both challenges and opportunities ahead, and no one takes a multi-billion-dollar economic impact for granted. Here are some of the challenges facing tourism and hospitality professionals this season. Foreign affairs remain shaky. The state of international relations with our closest ally, Canada, is notoriously strained right now, with few signs of abating, and that's bad for tourism. For decades, cross-border travelers visiting Western New York for day trips and weekend getaways had been a reliable and important segment of business for the Buffalo Niagara region. But President Trump's comments about annexing Canada inspired a Canadian boycott of all things American, which continues to affect tourism and hospitality professionals on our side of the border. There's a lot going on internationally as things relate to the United States that is impacting the tourism sector, said Josh Veronica, Director of Government Affairs at the Partnership. That has become complicated over the last couple of years, with none more so than Canada. The region's tourism attractions have noted a 30 to 40% drop in Canadian visitors, according to Visit Buffalo, and cross-border trips are down 16% compared with last year when the slump first started. Canadians are just the most lovely people in the world, but there are some salty folks across the border, and I took the brunt of it because of what is happening in Washington, D.C., Kaler said. They were saying, look, we love you, Buffalo, but we're not going to be back until your president is out of office, and a lot of that has to do with their overall sovereignty. Things were bad from the beginning. Cross-border travel to the United States dropped off quickly and steeply. Sentiment towards the president's policies and remarks was so negative, Visit Buffalo pulled the plug on a Canadian campaign for the time being and has shifted focus to new markets like Chicago and Boston, made possible by a huge increase in Visit Buffalo funding. Tighter visa restrictions and added paperwork, such as the potential review of 5 years of social media history, are pushing away some travelers. Veronica compared it to the added steps to visit Canada during COVID, such as filling out the Arrive Can app. I don't know about you, but my response was, I don't feel like I'm submitting all that. I'm good to stay in the U.S. I'll find something else to do. I'll go back to Canada when that's not a requirement anymore, Veronica said. The more onerous we make it to come to the United States, that's going to impact how many tourists we're able to attract, making it easier to get around. The partnership has deemed transportation an area that needs improvement in order to support a healthy tourism sector. Obviously, we have to be able to get people to our region to get them to enjoy it, Veronica said. The partnership said it is interested in efforts to connect New York City and Toronto with high-speed rail and is looking at whether it would be possible to get that route to run through Buffalo. But that talk is in very early stages. Visit Buffalo was instrumental in bringing ride-sharing to Western New York years ago after a locally hosted March Madness series showed it was necessary service that tourists would be looking for to get around. Now, the partnership is looking at autonomous Waymo vehicles, essentially driverless Ubers, for another solution. Users in places such as Southern California have said they feel safer not having to interact with a stranger driving, and data shows the vehicles cut down on crashes. The vehicles have been tested in the Buffalo Niagara market since 2024. As crazy as it seems, it's better off without the human error of having a driver, Veronica said. Bed taxes bring burden and benefit. Bed taxes have traditionally been designed to support tourism promotion. Collections in Erie County go to Visit Buffalo and support the Buffalo Convention Center, while collections in Niagara County support Destination Niagara USA and the free Discover Niagara shuttle that travels between points of interest in Niagara Falls and Old Fort Niagara, catering to tourists. But there is renewed scrutiny now that Amherst has proposed a bed tax in its budget, with money going toward the general fund and capital improvements, like a bed tax policies in Cheektowaga and Medina that go toward infrastructure and economic development. The proposal, which requires town board and state legislature approval, would impose a 2.5% occupancy tax on top of the bill paid by visitors staying at Amherst hotels, motels, bed and breakfast, and short-term rental properties, including Airbnbs and VRBOs. The town's bed tax, if approved, would be charged in addition to Erie County's occupancy tax, which is 5% for larger hotels and 3% for smaller hotels and other properties in the county. Bed taxes are a growing policy issue here locally, Veronica said. This is a growing trend. I think municipalities are looking to get creative with how they can generate revenue. But we're really interested in what happens with their revenue once it is generated. Where is it going? In development, rentals playing hard to get. Upstate New York's housing market isn't the only hot commodity in town. So is the apartment rental market, with Buffalo, Rochester, and Albany ranked among the most competitive small markets in the country because more than 70% of the renters chose to stay put. That's the conclusion of Rent Cafe's new rental competitiveness report, which placed Albany 17th, Rochester 18th, and Buffalo 23rd among the toughest small markets for apartment hunting. All three had little new inventory added, and a lease renewal rate well above the national average of 62.8%. Once renters find a place in upstate New York, they tend to hold on, said Esther Ermosi, spokeswoman for Rent Cafe, which is part of the Yardi. The report is based on market rate multifamily properties of at least 50 units. In Buffalo, which Ermosi called the most counterintuitive case, apartments were on the market for lease for an average of 56 days, 10 days longer than the national average. But with few new apartments hitting the market, the renewal rate rose to 73.6%, with 9 renters competing for every vacant unit and occupancy at 93.3%. A $6.6 million award helps power up the future. A business park in Jamestown will receive $6.6 million from Empire State Development Corp. As part of the state's first round of grants under a new program to expand shovel-ready and power-ready sites for fast-growing industries. The Mason Industrial Park will benefit from the money, which the Jamestown Board of Public Utilities will use to construct a 15-kilowatt substation and install a 6,000-foot underground duct bank and high-capacity cables to support an increased electrical load. The $7.5 million project will improve access to up to 12 megawatts of power across 66 acres and a vacant 120,000 square foot industrial building. The awards are part of the state's Promote Opportunity with Electric Readiness for Underdeveloped Properties, Power Up program, a new $300 million economic development initiative. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the May 3rd edition of the Buffalo News. We read from the Viewpoints section.
The following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision, or have another print disability